I had a message from somebody asking about modifying 357 brass to work in a 351. Now, there's quite a difference. 357 is a little short. That matters. Well, you do have to do some modifying to the rim, and the size of the rim is pretty critical. But also, if you do, you end up setting the bullet out quite a ways, because if the bullet isn't all the way out, you can have the second round get ahead of the top round, and they will rim lock like that, and that locks your bolt back. So the length is kind of critical. What I've heard people using is 357 maximum brass. I don't know how common that is, but if you use 357, you're going to have to set that bullet out quite a ways to make sure that that actually can't happen, that it can't jump, because it'll do that. And it locks the bolt wide open. And it's difficult to get them back out of the mag. It takes a little monkeying around. Okay, another thing in modifying brass for these self-loaders, the thickness, the rim is critical, because it functions to regulate the pressure from the mag on the bolt. This isn't just a mag release, it's actually a regulator. It's something most people don't understand, including the people who manufacture mags. That's why I have to, you hear people having trouble with the 10-round mags. And the problem with them is that the manufacturer didn't understand that this isn't just a mag release. That catch protrudes all the way into the mag and actually runs against the rims. That keeps the pressure even from the spring. If you don't, if your rims are too small, what happens is you'll find that your first shot will be your highest velocity, and it'll gradually drop as it goes down. I've done that by taking and cutting down a matchstick, sticking it underneath the mag release to hold it partially down, so it still holds the mag in place, but it doesn't regulate. And then you'll get just a consistent drop in velocity as the mag feeds out, as the pressure drops. In the same way, if that's how the mag sits in there. If you prevent the mag release from moving, when you strip off the top round, the next round won't come up until you back off on that pressure, because it's actually holding that next round down. See, it's still held in place. That has to flex every time a new round pops up. It strips off the top round, then it's barely perceptible, but it actually has to move to allow the next round to come up. That's where you run into problems with these aftermarket mags, because the manufacturers didn't take that into consideration, and they actually, it's a squared off edge here and big area here. So what happens, it'll feed off the first like 7 rounds. Then that catch will bump right up against the square edge of this and stop it. That's why, to make it work, you have to modify them to make it work reliably. If you're lucky, it'll jostle over, but generally they'll hang up. That's why on this one, I modified it by pulling that follower out, grinding a bevel on the top, and then grinding that clear all the way down except for the little bottom part. So it still stays in place and feeds reliably without that catch. But that's where, if you got too small a rim, it isn't gonna it's going to have absolutely no effect on regulating that pressure. And it makes a difference. That's why a lot of my testing I've been doing, I've been running 9 rounds in a 10-round mag. That way, when I shoot 5 rounds, they're all under the regulator. So they're all controlled. So the pressure remains the same on the bolt. Because it does make a big difference. There's when I first started shooting this with the 5-round mag, I couldn't figure out what was going on. Because you get, well, right at the time I considered it to be just wild ejection patterns. They'd throw one here and one there, you know, they would go all over. Which made it very difficult to find a brass because this flings them really well. You know, it really throws the brass out. Well, when I started shooting a 10-round mag, you know, I was running into this where I could see a pattern to the ejection. It would start out, it would be throwing, let's see, if the gun is like this, you would throw them forward. You go bang, 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 and then it would start coming back. And I couldn't figure out, okay, I could understand the scatter like that because of the changing mag pressure, but how was it coming back? Well, that's when I figured out that it was that regulator that was changing it. You get a velocity change right from the point where it stops regulating. And like on these stock 5-round mags, it happens to be that that point is right after your first shot. You know, you strip off one, and these have got strong mag springs, so believe me, it makes a change on the bolt. It makes quite a change on the velocity. So one is in the barrel, this one is pushing up on there, on the bolt, but it is being regulated. After that first shot kicks this one out, then the regulation is done. So you get a change of velocity. It's really apparent if you start looking. You know, I suspected this, and then when I finally got the chronograph, then I could sit and I could actually see exactly what it was doing. So that's why when I'm actually trying out load 9 rounds, shoot 5 in a 10-round mag. Then I can get them down. They vary like 5 feet per second. Like this, you're looking, you know, 40, 50 feet per second variation from that first and second shot. The first and second is always your high and your low. So you get better consistency with that. But it's all got to do with the rim thickness. You know, if that rim isn't big enough, there's no regulation there. It's interesting, and it took me a while to figure out what was going on. But like I say, the manufacturers of the magazines don't actually even take that into consideration because you can see they run that right up in that hole, which screws up the regulator completely. And like I say, they've got that edge there that will catch. They need a little work to work. Once you modify them, they work very well. There's not much you can do with the stock ones, though. So you're faced with that jump between regulated and unregulated. But like I say, I've done that where I have defeated that regulator by, you know, shaving down a matchstick, putting it underneath. But then you get that gradual decrease in velocity as the mag plays out. And like these 10-round mags, not such a strong spring. The original 10-rounders that came from Winchester have got such ungodly strong springs that most people have trouble actually getting a 10th round in them. Even these 5-rounders, a very strong spring, because this was all new. They're trying to figure out how to make something like this work. In fact, the original patent design in 1901, they had the mag release here, and you know, it was right in the front of the trigger guard, and it caught across the whole back. You know, there's many ways you can make a mag release, and that was just the way they did it. But then figured out that, okay, if we do it this way, we can actually regulate the feed. Not so important on 5 rounds, but like I say, Winchester was making a 10 round, and then there were aftermarket 15 and 20 rounds, and then when they were converted to full automatic, it makes a big difference. But you can modify brass to make it work, but like I say, this diameter is rather critical. If you get it too big, they aren't going to feed. Get it too small, they aren't going to regulate. So it has to be the right size. And like I say, lengthwise, if they're too short, they will jump in the mag and lock her solid. So it's nice if you can find the regular brass, or at least, get the right measurement here. I think a lot of the people's problems with these self-loaders are because they don't quite comprehend what's going on there. And like I say, this, it was funny. I watched Forgotten Weapons, and one day he was talking about this prototype rifle. It was, I can't remember what country this thing was from. But it was from 30s, 40s. And he was showing me the whole trigger mechanism, how this is laid out. And going on about how innovative this was. And he said, well, they kind of copied it from the French. The French kind of copied it from Winchester. You'll see the same layout, the same design in many more modern weapons, like in the 30s, 40s. But Winchester was doing this. 1901 was the design. It's funny. There's a lot of things that modern semi-automatics, they owe a great nod to Winchester, but nobody ever gives them the credit for it. Now, when I say about the regulating of the mag, one of the things that confused me was, why does my Thompson not throw it in that haphazard? Well, not haphazard, if you understand what's going on. There's a reason why it's thrown it that way. But that has to do, the Thompson throws them perfect, like a little 2-foot area. They always land in the same spot. But that comes from double stack mag. You're not getting a direct upward pressure. You're getting, the pressure is being regulated by, the spring pushes here. It's very easy to hold it back because a lot of the energy is being transferred. The force is being transferred sideways. Because this thing is remarkable, the Thompson, on how it'll lay brass down in one small spot. 351 is remarkable for how it will really throw it. And like my first thought was very randomly, but it's not random. There's a reason it's doing it. It's a change of velocity, throws them in different areas. So, rim diameter, critical.